On this episode of Spirit Talk.
Until you deal with that trauma, no matter how much you progress, no matter how strong you get spiritually, there's always going to be a limiter on you. And the only way to remove that limiter is by purging that trauma from the body. And a lot of these practices that I teach and a lot of these things that I do, not only do they build your spiritual energy, but they also have the side effect of purging trauma from your body, which I feel like is pretty remarkable.
Hi, I'm Chris Fleming, the creator of Spirit Talk. You're listening to the podcast where I'll be bringing you the greatest thinkers, researchers, and contributors from around the world to discuss what we know in the field of the paranormal, life after death, and the pursuit of higher consciousness. Hey, it's Chris Fleming. Welcome back to this month's edition of Spirit Talk. I have with me a spiritual teacher, an exorcist, and a magus of various magical backgrounds. He is going to talk about the life force and how we can raise one's personal vibration as well as improve our physical health. Plus, he has these techniques for building up our life force energy, as well as some collective set of skills that we can use to prosper spiritually. Now, he teaches varying forms of magical practices and offers to help those in spiritual crisis or who may be afflicted by the paranormal. Please welcome Sadhu Dah. Sadhu, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, I took a look at some of the information with your background. I mean, some of the things you cover is magic and rituals, hypnotherapy, energy healing, exorcism, spirit crossing, inner growth, and spiritual development. The biggest question that people always ask is like, wow, and I'm sure you get this all the time, how did you get into this?
Well, when I first started out on my journey of self-discovery and getting into the spiritual concepts of life and the metaphysical and paranormal, I actually had to get away from my childhood and my life as it was, because I was just so full of trauma and I was so angry at the world, and I hated everything and I hated everybody, and I didn't need a reason to either. And I met a monk named Thanaful Bhakti, and Thanaful had took me under his wing and started teaching me things such as like walking meditation and how to connect with the elements and various sitting meditations and mantras for reciting over mala. And I slowly kind of started to change little bit by little bit and kind of met different teachers along the way. And then one day I kind of woke up and realized, oh, snap, I'm not only the student, now I am also teaching.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Now, as you know, because you went through this own personal evolution yourself, containing all that anger, that emotion that builds within our subconscious as well as our consciousness. And sometimes it's displayed in certain moments of challenges that we go through. We may release that, unsuspecting to others. I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, there's so many people like that right now that are going through those types of challenges in life. How would you, state to some of our listeners that may be suffering from that inner turmoil that they've gone through later in life that kind of makes them either manic depressive, bipolar, or in some more polite terms, they have a short fuse?
Well, I would say approaching life from an artistic perspective and allowing what it is that your passion may be to come forward and be your approach. And to elaborate on that, for me, Gung Fu is a very big practice for me, as well as Qigong. Cultivation of energy in the body through movement. It's kind of where yoga and martial arts come together, if that gives some context for anyone that's not aware of those terms or practices. And I meet everything as if it's a fist coming at me in life, whether it be, the boss coming down on you, a spouse kind of bringing things to your attention that might not be favorable in discussion, losing friendships and various different hardships that we deal with in life. I will kind of describe it as like a metaphor for a fist. And so if I'm doing my Kung Fu practices and I'm using a Tan Sao, a wedging block, am I going to deflect this fist coming at me, or am I going to let it hit me? Am I going to intercept it, bring it into my space, and then use a yin vacuum, this encompassing energy, to fold it over? How am I going to meet that? And for some people, maybe that doesn't work. Maybe your art is dance or painting. How are you going to draw around this line that got put in the way? Are you going to add on to it and turn it into a beautiful flower? Or are you going to let it ruin your entire painting? If you stumble during a routine dancing, do you just sit down on the ground and start crying and give up? Or do you recover and you move forward gracefully and continue this dance that you're doing? Approach life passionately, artistically, through your medium.
Sadhu, that resonated with me with what you were just saying. And I think that's beautifully put. And giving you an example, if we take a look at converting energy into the expression or creative process, something negative happens to us, how can we alter that and change that? For me, it's always been in a way of sports or art, that physical expression, whether it's painting, drawing, or if it's some type of physical activity. I remember about 5, 6 years ago, actually 2017, I had been dating this girl for about 2 months, and I was kind of protecting my emotions and this and that. And she had said, why aren't you putting more into this relationship? Why aren't you opening up more? I want you to open up more. I opened up more, and she went running because she was emotionally unavailable, is what it was. And she even admitted she was emotionally unavailable, but yet she wanted me to open up, which made her feel wanted, but then she retreated from him. So she had her own little challenges she was dealing with. But my point is I was then devastated that she had built me up and brought me into this relationship to where now I had let my wall down and was doing all this giving. And then shortly after that, she just ends it. For no explanation, just ends it. And I was devastated. And I remember I said, okay, I'll give her a few days and I'll reach out again. And I reached out and she goes, nope, I still feel the same. And it hit me. And I went into this huge depression. And it reminded me of other relationships that had failed in the past. And I sat there where I had this anxiety and this I didn't know what to do. I couldn't take it. And then I remember says, you know what? What can I do? I've learned from my car accident in 2009, when you run into these challenges and things, said, okay, in this situation, what can I do? I need to release this somehow, not in depression and emotion. So I said, well, I just recently started painting and drawing again. So I took a piece of paper. I said, how do I feel? And I drew this shadow of a coffin. And then I drew this person, which was me, and my soul coming out of it as if it's just given up. But then I drew this little beautiful red rose that was growing out of the coffin shadow. And to me, that was signifying rebirth, regrowth, something new that was coming, a new beginning. I'm leaving this shell of my former self and I'm moving to another plane of existence, of evolution. And I remember I painted this and I loved this. I said, wow, this reminds me of Tim Burton, some of his sketches in his artwork. And I put it out there in the public to show, and I call it the beautiful death of feelings, because those feelings died for that individual, but yet it's beautiful because there's a rebirth. And I remember I sold some of the prints, and it is my favorite. And not only that, the people out there that follow me and this and that, they have voted and stated that this is their favorite piece of work and that it resonates with them. So my point of saying this is I took something, instead of becoming more depressed and thinking about it and bringing myself into a dark place, I used the creative energy to release it into something else. And I'm very grateful for that process. Is that kind of like what you're saying here?
Yes, exactly. So what you did is you created a form of catharsis through your medium of art. And by doing so, you were able to strip the charge, if you want to go hypnotherapy for a second, you were able to strip the charge of the built up trauma from what we call an ISE, an initial sensitizing event. Now, if this had been the first time you'd ever been broken up with or had this feeling of rejection, then, you would have had a certain emotional response, and you would have kind of reacted accordingly with that. And ideally, you would have moved through it, let the adrenal response finish, and then entered the parasympathetic. And you would have had this like release. But because of modern day society, we oftentimes just kind of push things down, move forward, keep going kind of attitude. And over time, these things build up inside of us. Now, the reason why you had something kind of like saying, oh, well, now this reminded me of this and this and this, because all of that never went away. That was all still happening in the background. And this new event kind of pushed that all up to the surface. And rather than fold to that pressure, you chose to vent and let it out and create something with all that emotional turmoil, which ultimately ends up kind of rewriting your neurology and telling the subconscious, hey, this pattern is okay to let go. It's not serving us anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't serving me anymore. I didn't want that pain. But at the moment, I didn't think there was any way out of it because it was just swallowing me whole. But in that state, I also did realize there had been previous in my life, either abandonment, rejection, in various ways, that it all came out because it was similar frequency. And I said, no, I can't take this because I know what I've gone through in the past at times in dealing with this. I am not going to allow that. So what do? I shaped it, like taking Play-Doh and sculpting something from it.
That's what we have to do with our emotions sometimes. We're never meant to keep them. I mean, it's kind of cute that we think we can, but you'll be happy more than one time in your life. The same with sadness. Just let it happen and then let it go.
Exactly. Now, you have trained and experienced the Buddhists with Taoism. What are some of the similarities you've seen in these experiences and these methods that you've practiced and you've learned from?
So with Taoism, there's a lot of ritual working, and it also depends on the sect that you belong to. I belong to the Mao Shan sect of Taoism under Dr. Wilson Young in Malaysia, and I'm actually going over there later this year to be training intensely for 2 weeks on how to do food talismans. If you've ever seen the yellow rice paper with the red cinnabar ink on it with the Chinese characters. So I'm going to be learning how to do that and apply the spiritual energy into it and knowing how to command the spirits that are used with the seals. But the whole aspect of ritual. So when we do something in Buddhism or we do something in Taoism, there's usually an element of ritual involved. So that's to kind of get the body going along. And then once the body is going along through these motions, which have meaning, which we give meaning to, then the mind is engaged with it. And when the mind and the body are engaged, the spirit just goes willingly.
That's fascinating, just the balance of the body, mind, and the soul. Now, have you found this because I'm looking at your resume here of all the things that you've done, how have you used some of these principles in dealing with either human spirits or entities, demonic, whatever you would end up calling them? How have you confronted them with some of these practices?
Well, what I like to do is simpler than what I used to do. I had to use all the tools at my disposal and apply all the lessons that I learned to get to a point where I was able to refine things. It seems like it's less work, but a lot of work goes into making it less work ultimately. I just use my energy as the simplest way to explain it, but it's a little bit more than that. Okay. I will kind of put myself into a meditative state to a certain vibrational resonance, either using like Simhakriya, pranayam, like breath work, specific breathing practices to kind of get my endorphins flowing, to get me in a certain floaty headspace and then allow myself to just kind of lift off. I'll also use Qigong and various different practices, and this is what I call like my warm-up. So once I get my body aligned with where my spirit is naturally sitting, then I'm very, very sensitive to the energies, and I'm able to consciously work with the energies and apply them and direct them to where I can use my chi fingers, my energy fingers, to reach out and grab a spirit and allow it to cross over or to bind something. And these are pretty advanced practices, if I'm being completely honest. It doesn't really just jump off to that. You got to build yourself there. And that's why in the beginning, using things like a trapping sigil, a sigil that, focused on given intent and it works in a specific way. Well, when you get into another level of practice, you can just think it and it's done because you're energetically applying it. It gets complicated and then it gets simple again.
Can you share with us maybe an experience or two where you've come in contact with a particular spirit or a situation involving one that was tormenting somebody or actually possessing somebody?
Man, I've had so many cases, but one that was actually quite personal for me when I was training with one of my first paranormal scholar teachers. And this man is also a High Lama. He's a Rinpoche, very divine being. He had told me I had an attachment that I needed to let go of. And I was not really so much aware or being directly affected by this attachment. But once I was made aware of it, I had phenomena start to occur right there in front of the teacher. And I had a friend when I was in high school who was brutally murdered. And it was a very, very traumatic experience for me. And it was something that sat with me for years, obviously. I mean, how can somebody not be affected by having a loved one, violently ripped from this world?
Right.
And I ended up having an experience of scorched marks on my skin, like second-degree burns in the shape of a handprint around my left wrist. And as I looked at it, it hurt. I felt the burn. And then my teacher said, "Are you ready to let him go?" And I said, "This isn't happening."
Right.
There's no way this is happening right now. And then I kept looking at my hand and I saw the burn, and it just kind of, reality was conflicting with reality, honestly. And I ended up telling him I needed a moment. And so I sat down, and he knew that I was very overwhelmed. And he said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and cross him over. He's become a wraith at this point. A wraith is different from a ghost. It's when a human spirit becomes the corrupted essence of what their trauma was or how they died. And because he was strangulated and burned to death, he became what we would call a fire wraith if we're going by classifications of spirits and beings. And so he obviously was a very dangerous spirit because he could start fires, he could inflict burns. Obviously, that is quite a problem that we would need to deal with, even if this wasn't a spirit attached to me. Right. So I sat down, and I was in the back of his car. I felt a presence, and he flipped up the rear view mirror towards me, and he said, "You don't have to look right now, but I know that you can feel him. And if you want to go ahead and look in the mirror, you'll see him, but it's not going to be pretty. But it's time for you to say goodbye to him, and we're going to send him off." And I looked into the rearview mirror, and I just had tears just flowing down my face. And I kind of saw, I felt the presence physically. There was a pressure. I could feel the rage, the anger that wasn't mine. It was his. And I could see him faintly, but in my mind, I could see him very clearly and vividly. And it was so grotesque, the burns and everything. And I mean, it was not my friend. And that was when I had that realization, like you're already gone. Like this is not you. This is some corrupted shadow of who you used to be. And so we let him go. And in that moment of releasing him, I felt the burn kind of start to like stop like hurting. And the teacher had given me a water bottle, and he poured it on my arm. And when I rubbed it, what was like blisters from the burn and the redness actually turned to like a jelly kind of, and wiped right off, and my skin was unharmed underneath it. And there's this weird kind of, I guess you could call it a type of ectoplasm, if you will. That was one of my first experiences in doing kind of casework. It was a very personal one.
That's incredible. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure when you begin to see the things just slightly outside our dimension and coming in contact with that, that's on a slightly different frequency and vibration, so we can't normally see it with our own eyes. But when our consciousness becomes aware of it, it begins to reveal itself. And it can be shocking for some. Some can either have fight or flight, or some can embrace it and just welcome it. And that's a really interesting story. Now, when you had that happen, obviously it was a lesson. It was something that became part of your experience. And as time went on, you probably had some more experiences. What have you found out of people? You laugh. Can you share another one?
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. So I had a situation where we had an individual that had a studio that was haunted. And I mean, this was a very interesting case because the level of phenomena was just really interesting. You could hear voices in the air, like in front of you. You could hear a voice, and there's nobody there, but it's as if somebody is actually speaking to you, and you can hear the volume and the direction and the space of where it's coming from. And these would happen all over that studio. And it was this whole building that, long story short, somebody had been renting one of the studio rooms, and they were a black metal band. And apparently they kind of got pretty serious with some ritual work.
Oh boy.
And they kind of crossed some wires that shouldn't have been crossed, and opened some doors that they didn't know how to close. And, lucky enough, somebody like me was kind of involved and brought in. And the highlight of that case is actually me getting levitated about a good 5 feet in the air, feet dangling down, multiple witnesses around me. And you could see the pressure marks of like hands gripped onto the side of like my torso. And then I was just violently flung into the wall, and I just kind of like slumped down. And then kind of like in the moment, I've talked about this before. So I would say I had an exaggerated reaction, and some people would be like, well, any reaction wouldn't be exaggerated given the circumstances. Well, I kind of yelled at everyone, like, get out of here, get out of here. And it was a dangerous situation, but at the same time, one of my masters had taught me, you don't give attention to the phenomena. Right. So if you have phenomena occurring, yes, exactly. Your fear is giving it a link that is feeding it and growing it. Absolutely. Now, that's not to say you don't do things, you don't approach it and deal with it. Like you need to do that, yeah. Right. But don't feed it your fear. Don't feed it your excitement. Don't feed it your strong reactions that are kind of like, if you have a child that's misbehaving and you ignore the child, more than likely, depending on the child, they're going to kind of get bored at some point, and they're going to kind of stop. Right. They may come back to it again, but there's going to be a break in that. But if you're constantly getting frustrated, or if you're encouraging that behavior, that is probably going to consistently keep happening. So when we're dealing with these spirits, when we have malevolent entities, I kind of adopt the train of thought like this is a psychopathic toddler type of intelligence, highly malevolent and super psychic, and it's quasi-physical in nature. Like, it's not a good combination. Like, not at all.
I totally understand. People listening, I mean, it's very rare that someone's levitated, but it does happen. I know many cases of other individuals that have witnessed that. I know I witnessed it with the Ouija board when my mom and I were doing as a kid, where I levitated. And back in 2010, the girlfriend I had, when something entered into me and I levitated off the bed. She went racing out of the house at 2:30 in the morning in her underwear to the police department, completely terrified. So these things happen. Now, any idea? I mean, I've discussed this with some exorcists and some priests in discussing how they're able to levitate and how they're able to create these types of tricks, so to speak. Obviously, it's some type of frequency vibration affecting the ions or the particles.
Electromagnetic field.
Right. There you go. Which would also, we would get our hairs.
It's the resonance.
Go ahead. Talk more about it.
So there's a resonance naturally of your electromagnetic field. And we remain pretty grounded, because there's this beautiful thing called gravity, and we just all adhere to it. But if the electromagnetic field of your own body is able to kind of be manipulated just the slightest, then an entity can find its way in. And because the entity itself is going to be quasi-physical in nature, there's a lot of rules to our physical plane that don't necessarily apply to it, because only parts of it are necessarily engaged within our physical plane. Then you start getting into some really complex science, and the understandings of that kind of will blow your mind a little bit. But in a nutshell, what is happening is they'll often, not always, but a pretty good point of where they go is the Wingate channel. So in like Taoist terms, this would be the back of the neck. So they're going to attach into there. They're going to go in. They're kind of in your astral spine or overshadowing it. And then they are playing with your own magnetic field. And then through playing with that magnetic field and putting their own energy, see what they fail to say often when it comes to like spirit possession and things like that is that there is give and take on both sides. If a spirit wants to possess and take control of the body and do things with the body, it needs a substantial amount of energy for that. So it has to get that energy through some means. And usually fear, get all that energy built up. It's feeding on that, it's sustenance. Then it can do something, parlor trick, if you will, that's ultimately going to get it to get more fear and more sustenance to the point where it can bridge a takeover. Then from there, it's going to use your body to generate the energy to do more things so that it can kind of progress into, we go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, infestation, then you have overshadowing, and then you have possession. It doesn't just jump straight to possession. That is something that does happen, but it is very rare. And usually when I go on to cases, I have a very specific way of approaching it because I see it more often than not where it's stage 1, stage 2, or stage 3. And they tend to go in order 9 times out of 10, but there is always that 1 out of 10.
Right. Right. So with these things in mind, it becomes, I would assume, and I'd like you to expand upon, very important for us to protect our life force and our personal vibration. What would you have to say about that?
I would say that's absolutely important, and not just for spiritual protection, but for the well-being and protection of your mind, your emotional body, everything you deal with on a day-to-day basis and how you live in the world. You need to have protection of sorts. And that all starts with the cultivating of practice, or what we refer to in Vedic terms as a sadhana, a daily spiritual practice. And it can be different for everyone, but you need to have something that's constantly progressing you forward, growing you. If not, you're staying stagnant. If you don't work out at all, you don't exercise at all, and then you go to the doctor and he tells you have high blood pressure, is it the doctor's fault or is it your fault?
Right. I mean, we need to take care of ourselves in more ways than one. Not only, of course, our health, what we eat and ingest, but also our mental state. You know, what do we fill our head with, and what do we do on a daily basis to move forward in positive ways, giving us further growth and development. Can you explain to them, from what you've learned, what is the life force?
So the Hawaiians refer to it as mana. In Japanese and Taoist culture, we call it ki. Chinese, they call it chi. And the Vedic Indian call it prana. All they're saying is there's this energy that is inherent with your body. You're born with it. You have a certain amount of it. You spend it up, and your physical body can no longer maintain itself, and you die. Now, we are able to prolong, we are able to strengthen it, and we are able to build it. And a byproduct of that is sometimes people will develop what they call siddhis, SIDDHI, or supernatural abilities, but it's not the intended goal of building this energy up. When we build this energy up, we are able to strengthen our immune system. We are able to enhance lung capacity, function of the kidneys and liver. We're able to cleanse the marrows in our bone. We're able to do a lot of really wonderful things that are of great benefit to the physical body, as well as maintaining an ideal mental state of stillness and inner awareness, and having the ability to react without immediately being triggered, but able to process it and move through it in a healthy manner. And we have this emotional balance where the slightest things aren't going to send us off the fritz.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, easily affected with emotions and certain things that happen to us. That something new comes along that's similar, it sets us off. And the thing is to heal from that, but also learn how to control it. You know, since emotion is an energy, there's also this universal energy, which is why I want to ask you about chi. I know after my whole life, I was never really able to see auras and stuff like that. And I was always in wonderment with people that have stated that they've seen auras. But I remember I got in a car accident in 2009, and I got a mild TBI, but also really bad whiplash that ended up damaging my neck and my area to where I would sense spirits. I always would sense the back of my neck. I'd get tingling with spirits. But after the car accident, it damaged it from the C2 all the way down to the T1. And I no longer could feel that electromagnetic sensation anymore because there was pain. So I had to learn how to expand my consciousness and use my consciousness to detect any changes in the ether, electromagnetic field. But my point is that when we talk about auras, I remember going through treatment, physical therapy. She was doing craniosacrum, and she asked if I ever saw colors, and I said no. After a few sessions with her, all of a sudden I started seeing colors. It's like she opened something up within me, and I started seeing colors when I closed my eyes. I would see colors differently in nature, how they'd be more vibrant and almost alive. And then sometimes I'd see these colors that would move as if they had their own consciousness. Then I was shortly able to see, after that, colors in people and the exchange of colors in between people. And I thought, wow, this is a beautiful thing. I'm seeing more outside of our visual spectrum, more into the actual spectrum that exists between IR and ultraviolet lights. Then I realized that this life force, as you call it, this energy that's also exchanging, it not only represents the energy that is in our soul, our spirit, but also the connection to the Creator and this energy from the Creator that flows through us. It makes me go back to two experiences, and I want your input on this because I've never really fully got a direct answer. I remember I went and took martial arts, taekwondo and karate after, and I don't think that was the best training to get to understand chi energy. It didn't really get me to where I wanted.
Try gung fu.
Try what? Try what?
Gung fu.
Okay. Gung fu. Here's why I state this. And to me, this is remarkable, and it would sound something out of an X-Men or a sci-fi superhero movie. But I remember when growing up, we used to have, I would touch light bulbs, or I would touch electrical, and light bulbs would explode, computers. as this energy would come through me. And same thing with my mom would have that happen. And sometimes I would shock people. But I remember once I was really upset about work, and I was so frustrated the way we were being treated in the office. I went to the gym to go work out, and every single thing I was touching in the locker room, there was these major sparks, not just like little static that we get from the carpet and balloons. We're talking major sparks that were popping that everybody was hearing. And you could see this like lightning bolts come out of my fingers when I would touch stuff. As I went into the gym and I said, I'm going to go on the treadmill. I'm going to walk and warm up for 20 minutes. My girlfriend at the time walked in. I said, you got to see this. And I put my hand about 3 inches away from the metal bar of the treadmill. And we saw in between, just like lightning coming out of all my fingers into the metal bar being absorbed. And she stepped back going, oh my God, what's wrong with you? I said, I don't know. You can see this. She goes, yes, I can see this. I go, something out of Tesla with the Tesla coils. And it was very powerful. We were hearing the sparks and the sounds. And then it would slowly get weaker and weaker, and then it was gone. So the question is, what was this energy that was flowing through me? It was visible, noticeable. It's something you see out of sci-fi movie. But there is one more story I want to share, similar with that. I do want to warn you, though. Some people might think this is a little violent, it's aggressive, but remember, this was my sophomore year, freshman year in college when this happened. I went to this party outside with some friends. It was near my house. It was not too far away. And I walked up, and the guy wanted us to pay to get in. I said, listen, I just want to walk around, see if some of our friends are here. They told us to stop by. He says, no, you can't come in. So he starts shoving me and telling me to leave. And I'm like, come on, man, just, let me go in. And worse came to worse. I said to him, listen, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to get in a fight. I don't want to hurt you, nothing like that. But I'm not going to allow you to try to hurt me. So then he shoved me real hard. And next thing you know, it's just a blur to me. But I had picked him up by one arm, raced across the grass next to the next door neighbor's fence, one of those metal fences. It broke the fence in the lock. And I went inside that yard and raced across the yard to where the fence joins to the next property. And I hoisted him up with one arm over the fence to where he was on his back, with his legs up in the air. And I said, I told you, I didn't want to fight you. Why wouldn't you listen? At that moment, I was like, holy cow, how did this happen? How did I pick him up with one arm? I mean, I was a football player back then, I think, but you just can't pick up some guy. And this guy was bigger than me, taller than me. And it was one arm. So after this happened, I had a question like, where did this come from? What just happened? It was obviously energy that channeled through me that I believe from the universe saying, hey, there's a thing called free will, and he's saying, don't hurt him, don't do anything. But yet you went against that free will. And that's why what happened. I wanted to learn, how can I control this? How can I use this in ways of healing or use in other ways of protection? And I don't think I ever fully realized or learned how to do it. What would you call that when that energy comes through, whether it's something we can see with this white, powerful energy that shocks, or it turns into this amazing, invisible force, like a protective force that's channeled through you?
If it's unintentionally done, I would call it magical puberty.
Okay.
So, uncontrolled psychic emanations that kind of just happen spontaneously due to the pressure of an event or situation. These aren't uncommon things that could occur from somebody who's highly psychic, but now being able to reproduce that at command and intentionally, now that is the real question. And the way that you would want to work towards getting control over that and being able to wield that in a powerful way, there's no shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
This is a long-term practice. And that is by cultivating the energy, becoming intimately aware with it, and being able to direct it consciously rather than it be a subconscious knee-jerk reaction. And that's the whole emphasis of sadhana. Sadhana is so important. On my blog, I have a couple of different examples of adrenal response, and Vedic breath control is one of them. And that one talks about doing Simha Kriya, which is a pranayam that purges trauma from the body as well as builds and cultivates the spiritual energy. And doing that over time it's undeniable, the results. You will definitely see results from doing that. Also, getting aware of your energy body and playing with it. The same way that you would, look at your hand and see, okay, what all can I do with this open hand? I can turn it into a fist. I can extend each digit simultaneously or one at a time. I can do all of these intricate things, and then I can introduce tools, and I can do things with these tools. So we realize that we can do all this stuff with our hand, but how many of us actually ever look at our hand and marvel at the things that one hand can do, right, or that your feet can do, your body can do? It's incredible. And then taking that realization deeper and seeing that you have a spiritual body attached and maneuvering this physical body. But many of us just look from the locked box perspective of, I'm here on this physical world with this physical body and this physical brain.
Right.
And we don't really tap into the other aspects of life. But if we are willing to tap into those other aspects of life, and we're willing to explore that and grow that and cultivate it, then we will amaze ourselves with what we are capable of.
Sadhu Dah, thank you for explaining that. Yeah, I need to take a look deeper into your website and begin practicing some of the things you're describing from your website. But here's another story, a vision I had, and I know this is kind of way out there. I spoke about this briefly in the past, but this involves chi energy flowing through the body and the hands from the source. And here's the story. I had a vision in 2019, and I know when something is very relevant and that I am presently there with my spirit and my higher consciousness, that it's not a dream, that I am in that place and time for a specific reason to be revealed. I will look down at my hands. I'll look at my palms, and then I'll flip both my hands over. And I said, okay, I'm in control of this right now. I am actually present, and I am rotating my hands, meaning that I am aware. I am here. And then I will look at whatever's revealed to me. That's happened a couple times, and they've been very profound experiences that have completely impacted my life. But I had one in November of 2019, and I was somewhere, I believe it was possibly Switzerland, just because the way the hills looked and the farms and everything, and there was this camper, and everybody was running in fear. And I would try to approach them like, hey, what's wrong? What are you running from? But they were in such flight that they could not even acknowledge me because they were completely terrified. And I said, they're obviously running from something. What are they running from? And I'm looking around. At first I thought maybe it's a class 5 tornado, or maybe it's Godzilla or something. I just don't know. I've never seen someone so terrified. Then I look over the hills in the distance, and I see this black mass, kind of like a black hole, that is just absorbing everything. And the darkness is coming down onto the ground, and there's no wind or spinning or anything, so I knew it wasn't a tornado. And I just see everything being absorbed like a black hole. And I looked at it, so I go, what the heck is that? And then when I looked at it, I connected with it consciously, and I saw that this was pure evil. And this thing had been released somehow, and it was absorbing everything. And I realized, oh my God, I better get in this camper and drive off. I said, but no, you can't outrun this. This is coming forward, and it's engulfing everything. So I said, well, why? And then I went and looked at my hands. I looked down at my hands, and I flipped them. I said, oh my God, I'm really here. But then something said to me, you must learn to control your chi, because you and many others are going to need it to confront what's coming. And I looked at this, and I realized that love, light, and the chi that comes from the Creator through the universe and through us, that connects us and gives us life, needs to be sent out towards this thing to keep this thing back. Now, I woke up, I wrote it down, I did a drawing of what I saw. I've spoken about it in the past. Then I saw a documentary, it was on Amazon Prime, and it's called Witness of Another World, about this gaucho that had an incredible encounter. This encounter was actually a prophecy of this darkness, same thing that I had experienced, that was engulfing everything. And then in the Indian prophecies and everything, they've been speaking about this, that it's coming. And I said, oh my God, there's somebody else that has witnessed this too. Have you heard of anything like this? Or question number 2 is, and I think you've already covered some of it, how can I prepare as well as learn more to channel and control that chi energy to use that as a force to combat this, if it actually happens, or for my own use in the future for protection?
So I can answer both of those. As far as hearing anything about that in particular, in various different mythologies and cultural traditions, there's always been a theme of a greater evil on the horizon. And so in some sense,
the darkness.
Yeah, I have kind of like heard something in relation to that, but it reminded me of something from Indian culture that the Vedics spoke of, which is a term called jiva samadhi, which is like spiritual suicide. And when a yogi reaches a certain point of enlightenment and peaking of energies, sometimes they will leave their body by choice intentionally. And this has been witnessed. Time Magazine had wrote about this when Paramhansa Yogananda left his body, and he was the first yogi to come to America. If you haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda, I highly suggest that. It's a very incredible book. Anyways, okay. So these jiva samadhis are all over the Eastern continent, and there's a few kind of outreaching into other areas of the world. But what they are is they're these pinnacles of power from these powerful yogis that left their bodies with peaked energy. And it's said in Vedic culture that the culmination of all this energy dotted like a grid across the planet is what is actually keeping humanity from going backwards into a very barbaric type of civilization again.
Wow.
So I don't know if that kind of like helps in any way, but that was definitely something that kind of came to mind when you had mentioned that. And then as for what you can do, it's a hard answer to give because there's so much that I would just want to show you. And over the phone, is kind of a difficult endeavor. It's not impossible, but also there's time crunch.
Where do you live?
I live in Bellingham, Washington.
Okay, you're in Bellingham, Washington.
Yeah, if you ever had the desire to come up here and learn some stuff, I would be more than willing to help teach you some things, and
I would love
could
to.
also introduce you to one of my masters as well, who is just, I mean, it's kind of scary the level of power this man has, but he is like one of the most gentle souls that I've ever encountered in my life. And there's just a whole culmination of things that I would kind of put on you very quickly from practices and knowledge and things of that category to kind of like strengthen you, get you started. And then it would just be you applying yourself with that foundation, and you would build the house from there. I give you the foundation, we build it together, and I give you the blueprints, but you're the one who builds the house and then lives in the house.
Oh, that's great. I got to take you up on this offer. How far are you from Seattle?
Seattle is about maybe 2 hours.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours south of me.
I may be doing a trip to Seattle in a couple months. Maybe I can come out and see you. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, please reach out if you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to take away from what I brought up, and thank you for sharing that, because I'm going to look into all that, and I want to talk to you further in the future here. But you have learned a lot of principles, a lot of techniques, and can you discuss with us the importance of building your life force energy, and give us 3 techniques to do so?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. The importance of it, as I kind of touched on earlier, is just it makes you healthier than you could possibly imagine. There's a Taoist master that I know had explained to me, diet is kind of hard for me to not do the accent, but I'll try my best. He's like, diet is not important. People get so hung up on diet. Chi is most important. Chi is your true sustenance. You can have poor diet, but good chi, and you will be okay. And this is coming from like a man that was in his 90s that would eat Twinkies and Ho-Hos on a regular basis, but he was just in impeccable shape. But he would do Tai Chi for like 3 hours a day, every single day.
Wow.
So, there might be something to it.
Right.
and so with cultivating our energy, one of the most important parts of that is that we heal all this trauma that our body has picked up that does not serve us, that actually hinders us from aligning to higher vibrations. Until you deal with that trauma, no matter how much you progress, no matter how strong you get spiritually, there's always going to be a limiter on you. And the only way to remove that limiter is by purging that trauma from the body. And a lot of these practices that I teach and a lot of these things that I do, not only do they build your spiritual energy, but they also have the side effect of purging trauma from your body, which I feel like is pretty remarkable.
Oh, that's great.
The first technique that I would share with you is one that one of my masters swears by, and I do as well. I'm definitely a big fan on this one. So you've heard me mention the pranayama and the breath work before. So in the term Simha Kriya, I'm going to teach you Simha Kriya, and then there's also a blog article on my website that discusses it as well. So if you forget, you can either listen back to this podcast or you can go onto my blog and read it, depending on how you learn. But we take
for everybody listening, I'll put the link on this when I post this podcast. I'll put the link that goes directly to that blog for everybody so they can check it out.
Perfect. With Simha Kriya, we start preferably seated because you are definitely going to get lightheaded. And you're going to take the tongue and hang it all the way out your mouth and down like a dog, like just let it hang down like past your bottom lip. And then you're going to open your mouth wide and you're going to do 21 like very deep breaths, almost like a dragon. So like,
wow.
So you'll do that 21 times. Then the second step is you're going to do 21 more breaths, but this time your tongue is going to touch the roof of your mouth. So it'll be all the way at the top, your teeth will be showing, and your mouth will be open wide again with the tongue at the roof of your mouth touching. And then you're going to go 21 times again. And then once you finish that, you're going to exhale completely, relax yourself, close the eyes, take in a big deep breath, and you're going to like pressurize the cabin. You're going to tense every muscle in your body with this full breath in you. And this actually will, over time, doing this is going to make you a much better diver. You'll be able to increase your lung capacity and hold your breath for longer. Not always, but sometimes I'm actually able to hold my breath for over 2.5 minutes, which I consider to be pretty dang good. And you will hold your breath as long as you comfortably can with that pressurized breath inside of you, muscles all fully tense. And then when you exhale, you completely relax your body. And it's kind of intoxicating. It feels really good. And you do it enough, and eventually when you get into that holding breath phase, you'll start to go into what the Japanese Taoists refer to as mushin, which is a term for no mind. So it's being completely aware. You are present and fully aware, but you are experiencing absolute nothingness. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's very peaceful. It's oh my gosh, it is a beautiful, beautiful place to be. It's amazing. I love it very much. And if you do these practices, you can experience states like mushin, which are like a type of samadhi. Samadhi meaning higher states of consciousness, super consciousness. You can do really powerful magic in a state of samadhi. Actually, should be done in states of samadhi. And you can also do, like some of the most powerful Kung Fu masters, they fight from that state of stillness and nothingness. And, it's just, it's incredible. We could go into so many stories about that, but I got 2 other techniques I got to teach you here. So the second technique, this one is more of a mantra, and we all know the Om, Aum, Om.
Yep.
Well, there's a way to actually strengthen the Aum and make it very, very powerful, as well as bringing your consciousness into a higher alignment to taste these states of samadhi that I mentioned. And it has a side effect of also cleansing the energy in the body and cultivating and building up the energy. You'll take a seated position and you're going to resonate 21 times each. So the ah, the oo, and the and the ah is going to be ah, and that's going to be coming from your chest with your mouth completely open. So just ah, and you'll do it until your breath runs out. You'll do that 21 times. So after, that one ah ends, you'll do the next one, and you do that 21 times. Then your second count for another 21 times is going to be the oo, and the oo is going to come more from your mouth, and it's going to be you're going to curl your tongue into a U. So you'll curl it into a U, and you'll go ooh. Yeah. So you'll do that 21 times. And then the last one is the and that's going to be tongue completely pressed against the top roof of your mouth with your mouth completely closed, and you're going to feel a buzzing in your head, and that's going to be and you'll do that.
Okay.
Then the third time, this is locking it all together. You'll do a count of 21, which is going to be yeah. So then you're doing the ah from the chest, the oo from the mouth with the U tongue, and then the with the tongue to the top of the roof of the mouth, buzzing from the head. So you'll be doing the full aum in the way that it's actually supposed to be taught and done through Vedic practices. This is equal parts like Kriya and Jnana yoga, but we're not going to get into like the semantics of like what tradition is this, what tradition is that. That is going to be a very, very powerful tool. And also, I would say that if you find yourself in a scary situation where there is a paranormal entity, or where you're being challenged with dark thoughts, or shadow, as they say, let out a couple of those properly enunciated aums and tell me that doesn't help, because that is it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, Sadhu, I from one of my near-death experiences, and I came back and I heard a tone on the other side in heaven, which was just amazing, is I ended up buying a little chime block, and I use that before I do readings, but then also if I feel I have an attachment, I'll hit this chime block like ding, and then what I do is not only does it start vibrating around my body, I'll use it like soap where I go all over my body for my energy field, but I'll also, as you're stating here, I will hum that same tone to try to get my body to be in tune with that frequency. What you've just stated right here is doing this technique that goes above and beyond what I was just doing with my chime. And like you just said, I found too that negative spirits don't like that perfect harmonic tone, because when you're controlling your own vibration,
it dislodges.
Yeah, it does. Exactly. That's phenomenal. Oh, this is great. This is great.
Yeah, it actually.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. It'll dislodge a spirit from the space in between our realm and theirs that they're inhabiting to be here in what we define as our physical plane. So they're not technically really here. I've given this example before where, if you had, let's say you had a cross and you knew there was a spirit in this one spot in the room, and you throw the cross at the spirit, it's going to go right through it, right? And the spirit's just going to still be there. Now, if you had consecrated and charged that cross, it doesn't even matter if it's a cross. It could be a penny. It could be anything really, as long as it's not plastic. Plastic doesn't really hold good energetic charge. Anyways, you would consecrate put these vibrations, these emanations of tone, saturate it with this energy. And then when you throw that object to where that spirit is, it will dislodge it from the space that it's in, because you're hitting it on a resonant level that it cannot occupy space within.
I love that. Dislodge spirit from the space that it's in. That's incredible. That's a great way to describe this.
It's what you're doing with mantra.
Yeah. Dislodge the spirit from the space that it's in, because it's occupied that space. Now you control that space, and then by the frequency, the vibration, it can no longer either resonate or survive in that space because you've controlled it, but also you've pushed it out. That's really cool.
And if you wanted to take that to another level, you expand that resonance to a whole room, to a whole house. Yep. The spirit can't inhabit it. And then you keep it from coming back in by warding, using your energy, applying mantra, and tracing with your energy fingers holy symbols or sigils on the walls that energetically imprint. And this is like some of the higher level magical practices that I teach. And then you're able to create these energetic wards on the walls and essentially put your house in like spiritual lockdown where nothing can get in. And then because of the high resonance that you have in the home already, with the saturation of the energies, you're keeping those higher vibrations locked in as well.
I should have done this years ago in my house. I got stuff coming and going.
If I ever go to a hotel, the first thing I do when I go to a hotel.
Man. No excuse, Chris. No excuse anymore. So, no, this is...
I think you'll really enjoy...
phenomenal. This is phenomenal. And this would then lead us into what? The third technique?
Yes, exactly. So I mentioned using the energy fingers to trace the sigils and the wards, right? Well, how do we use our energy sigils, Sadhu Dah? Oh, well, that's really a good question. We use our chi hands. Well, how do we use our chi hands? I'm going to tell you how right now.
Awesome.
You're going to take your middle finger and you're going to touch the center of your palm. So picture there's a dot in the center of your palm. Touch your middle finger to it.
Okay.
Now, before you open your hand and release that middle finger up, I want you to imagine in your mind's eye a flower blossoming as you lift that middle finger up, and then your chi fingers are now activated. God. So you do that on both hands, and then if this also is a good gauge for your sensitivity, because if you feel it right away, congratulations, you have actually cultivated your chi.
That's crazy.
A fair amount.
It's almost like...
Exactly. Most people don't know how to do this.
It's almost like, well, I just want to say, first thing that comes to mind is like Spider-Man. When Spider-Man puts his finger there to then do the web that shoots out. But when you lift it up, you could feel this almost like this coldness vibration that comes out of my hands. I'm feeling, almost like as if there's balls of energy like that are appearing.
If you space your palms between each other, have both palms facing each other, you can feel the energy forming in between your hands.
Yeah, I've done this. Ball of energy.
And then if you take both pointer fingers and just have them like a couple inches apart, you can feel a very strong current flowing between both of them. Yeah. And if you get it developed enough, what's really trippy is you can get people to see a faint line there that they'll kind of like scratch their heads and rub their eyes. They're like, is that really there? Yeah, that's chi. That's condensed chi, but it's chi.
You know what's amazing, what you just described right there, Sadhu, is that I had studied the gateway analysis, the gateway by Robert Monroe, and it was discussed, and I've discussed it in the past. It was on the CIA website. And one of the parts of the program that he's done in this audio program that he created back in the 70s is the energy bar tool, where you will create this energy bar in front of you, and you can do it with your hands, and you can shape it and stuff like that. It was interesting during one of the sessions while I was doing that with the energy bar tool, I got curious, like, what's behind the energy bar? Like, I can take this and send this anywhere. What's behind it? And as I peered behind it, I witnessed an experience that I had. Now, remember, I did this about a year ago, 2 years ago. I went back in time to 1997 when I was at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery with about 10 other people, And several of us looked up and witnessed this energy bar that appeared floating above us about 10 feet in the air, and we had no idea where it came from. It looked like those one big long bars of light, that ultraviolet lights that you see in the ceiling. You take all those big giant light bulbs. It looked like one of those, but it was glowing so vibrantly. We thought it was some type of alien thing or portal or something. But using the gateway, I had sent that to the past. And there I was peering down, looking at all of us. As I looked past the energy bar tool, I took that into a different place in time. So it's interesting how this energy can be used, and it's not bound by our laws of physics, but either not bound by our time.
No. Time is something we made up to make sense of things. And something worth noting as well, when you're ready to close your energy point, you just fold your middle finger back in. And the reason why we always want to turn off our energy after we're done using it is because if you're not very accustomed with working with the energy and you just have your points open all day long, you're going to be soaking in all the beautiful emotions from people, whether they be negative, toxic, healthy, or not. You could pick up somebody's anxiety and have an anxiety attack. Like it's really interesting. You can screw yourself up in marvelous ways. And speaking from experience, I got a little overeager when I first learned that technique. And my master just kind of let me have at it, knowing that I would learn several valuable lessons there. And you can actually extend the point into the iron core of the earth. If you just stand, on grass and then extend your hands down into the ground, you can connect to the iron core of the earth, and you can purge toxic energy from your body and dredge your meridians.
Oh, wow.
And then you can draw healing energy from plants and from like the world around you and bring it into you. You can use this when you're doing energy work with other people, and you can create energy gloves so that you don't actually take on transference when you're working with a client. There's so many things that I teach my advanced students when it comes to playing with chi and using it in very practical ways.
Well, I've just learned in these few moments that you've been speaking that I've been a rebel and I haven't done any of these things, which could explain some of my emotional changes, my getting heavy and oppressive moods due to not purging this toxic energy and not closing down my own energy. I'm guilty. I admit it. All these years, I'm guilty.
I'll give you a little bonus technique if you want. So this one is one of my favorites, but I'm also a glutton for punishment sometimes. This one's going to be very uncomfortable, but it's going to feel really, really good at the release and after. You'll turn on your energy point and you'll let a color come to mind and think of something that is uncomfortable to you, that maybe plagues you from time to time, whether it be anxiety, depression, a specific memory. It doesn't really matter. Think of something uncomfortable and then allow it to give you a color, and then find where it is on your body. So let's say for me, anxiety in my lower belly is yellow. Okay. And then we have our energy points turned on. We're going to, and this is one of the advanced practices, so maybe everyone listening at home isn't necessarily going to do this, but work yourself up to it by doing the other practices. Right. So you will turn on the energy, and then you will allow a electric purple to start flowing from your palms. You're going to focus that on the spot. So for example purposes, the yellow anxiety in my stomach, you're going to let the energy hand pulsate that electric purple there. You may start to feel a little bit nauseated. You may start to feel like sweating. These are good signs. This is actually good. Have a bucket, trash can, or the sink in front of you and start energetically stroking that up, like you're rubbing your stomach up to your chest. And then once it feels like it's just about to like release or it gets to be too much, immediately loosen your lower jaw and start coughing. And in some cases, you may actually throw up. This is like a serious purge. You're like purging like so much. And yeah, it's very, very effective. I learned this from a lama, and you'll purge that energy out. I've had a couple times where I did this like after a particularly nasty case, and I actually vomited up like black like shadows that as soon as they hit the sink they dissipated like in wisp like smoke. So yeah, you can experience some weird stuff when doing this, but most likely you're just going to cough your ass off or vomit. Okay. And then afterwards you're going to feel lightheaded and your body's going to feel really light and you'll feel really good.
Is this similar to when people do ayahuasca and they purge after and they go to some dark place?
Kind of, except for we bypass that whole need for taking an outside
substance,
manner of ingesting something, and we're using our own energy, and we don't have to go through this whole long trip and process and etc. We're just kind of speed running it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm definitely going to need to do that. It reminds me of a entity experience I had where these beings were taking out this black stalagmite type thing out of my body. And they said that reptilians or whatever else had put that in me. And it was a crazy experience. I had it come through after a regression. And I just saw them taking this like black tar out of me. And I'm like, what the hell is that? You know, some type of negative.
Toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I'd never seen anything like that before. And when you're talking about this, I'm like, oh my God, that's reminding me of that experience. So much that goes on that we don't see. We don't realize, and we think it's our own internal pain. And there's many methods to, I guess, remove that. But these techniques, I'm just looking at them because I was typing them down while we're talking, but I am going to go to your website and learn more about it, is phenomenal because this is something that everybody can practice and they can do at home. And you should do it to create better balance within your life force, correct?
Yes. And, these techniques that I shared, they're very simple to do, but that does not mean you should underestimate the power of what they can do or add to your life.
Right. Now, we're winding down, and I want to thank you so much for sharing these because I know a lot of my listeners are going to go out there, check out your website, and they're also going to try to learn some of these techniques. Now, your website is thesadhudah.com, and I'm going to spell that. The link will also be on the Planet Paranormal website for the podcast, but Sadhu, SADHU.DAH.com. Please check that out and take a look at some of the services that he offers, as well as read a little bit more about his studies and his experience of what he's learned. Also, the different areas that you cover. What else would you suggest people to do to get a hold of you?
I would say reaching out through my website is going to be the best way. I have the account linked up with my personal email, so I always get notifications, and I tend to check that at least once or twice a day.
I'm also looking at your blog right now. There's some great articles on here, so what I'll do is I'm going to link to this, and I'll read some of these on my iPad, but I know I'm going to be redoing my my website, so I'm going to want to talk to you and link some of these things to my website as well, that people can take a look at this, such as what is a wraith, 2 basic classifications of hauntings. You're talking about certain cleansing, sleep paralysis. You go into some real good detail on some of these topics here. So wonderful job on the website.
Thank you. I realize that not everybody may be quite at the level where they want to invest in some of the services but I provide, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be willing to absorb information that I put out there. So I do try to do a blog once, sometimes twice a week, and I'm working on uploading more videos. My YouTube's on there as well, and then I also have a list of like podcasts that I've done on there, and a gallery with photos. And I mean, there's a lot to dive through on that website.
There is. And for everybody listening, is he teaches courses, whether it's a 60-minute class or 8-hour classes, such for magic school, telemancy, summoning spirits, crossing spirits, soul retrieval and trauma processing, hypnotherapy sessions, pranic healing, mantra saturation, and some other wonderful stuff. So please check it out and see if there's anything that resonates with you. Then be in contact with him and set up a session with him because he's got a lot of wonderful things that he covers. That website is thesadhudah.com. TheSadhudah.com. Well, I want to thank you for reaching out to me, and I want to thank you for coming on this podcast, Spirit Talk, because this was wonderful. I learned a lot just within this past hour.
I really appreciate you having me, and I'm all about service to community and sharing what was shared with me, and ultimately we heal together.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that. And I wrote down a bunch of different notes that I want to look at later and digest from your website. Plus, with the fact that you're in Washington, and I do know that within the next couple of months I'm going to go out to Seattle. I want to discuss with you, see if I can drive out, and, meet you and talk with you. Maybe we can spend a day discussing stuff as well as learning stuff too. Because I always like to learn from others as well.
I welcome that. And when you get up here, just let me know.
Oh, absolutely. I'll talk to you beforehand to plan it. Sadhu, thank you so much. Is there any last words you have for the listeners?
Yeah, I always like to end things with some positive encouragement. And I'd say that whatever you're going through in life right now, whatever's weighing you down, just realize that you yourself have unlimited potential and power. And it's all a matter of perspective. No matter how bad it is, the thing that you're facing or dealing with, whatever has you weighed down, you just need to go inward and that weight will collapse away from you.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
To my listeners, this is Chris Fleming and my guest, Sadhu Dah. Thank you for listening to this month's edition of Spirit Talk.